Have you ever looked at a photo and thought, something about that just feels right? And then looked at your own and wonder why it doesn't hit quite the same way? It's not your camera. It's not the light. A lot of time it comes down to this. Hi everyone, this is Shelley. I'm going to talk about contrast in your images. You can introduce contrast as you take a photo, and things to look for are like colour and contrasting colours. So if you have, for instance, a red bird and then you have a pale green background, that red bird is going to pop. And so there's some other ways that you can do it as well, but I want to talk about the editing side of it. And I always say to my clients when they come to me, you need contrast, and that can be added after, when you open it up either in Photoshop or in Nik Collection, and they have just released their version 9 of it. And after I've finished talking, I'm going to show you how I add contrast to an image in Nik Collection, and I think you'll find it interesting. So light is a big one. It can completely change your image, and I'm talking about light and dark and letting them blend together and then have that separation. And this is a good way to start getting some contrast in your image. And particularly in the mornings, you're going to get very strong contrast when you start looking for that light. And then when you bring it in to Photoshop, you can add a bit of contrast. And it's not hard. It's just really knowing what you want. And I will show you again some few examples of where I've added a bit of contrast to an image that I did in the field, getting the best I could and starting with a good image. I think that's important. So the ones I'm showing you are my good images that I think are good images and that I just enhance with a bit of contrast. DxO have just released Nik Collection version 9, their creative editing toolbox. I've been very fortunate that I've had access to this software just before it was released. This is a creative image and I'm not trying to over-process it. Just enhance what's already there and bring to life a little more. When I'm working in the Nik Collection 9 using Colour Efex and Viveza, there are three things I focus on. First, contrast. This is what gives the image depth and helps the subject stand out. Second, saturation. I don't increase saturation at all. I might use a touch of vibrance occasionally, but generally I leave it alone, because when contrast is working well, the colour already feels richer without forcing it. And third, detail on the subject. I want to keep that fine detail in the bird. That's important. I might let the background fall away a little, but not the subject. So I'll use Colour Efex to bring out detail and Viveza to shape the contrast and warmth, just to give the image a bit more presence without losing that natural feel. I've opened the Pink Cockatoo in Adobe Photoshop 26. You don't have to have Photoshop to use the Nik Collection 9. It can be a standalone system as well, but I like to use it in Photoshop because I do a little bit of editing in Photoshop sometimes, and sometimes I will go into the Viveza and do some adjustments. So let's open up the Viveza. So just over here on the bar and open. This is what you will see when it's open. And what we're going to look at is on the right-hand side, we're going to look at the sliders. And you can adjust the brightness right down through to hue. Then you've got highlights, midtones, shadows. So if you wanted to, you could lift the midtones on this, but I'm not going to. And then you can also, in Collection 9, you've got Add Local Adjustments, which is masking. And I will look at that at a later date. But I also mask in that Photoshop, and I'll show you how I do that with this particular image. So let's have a look at the contrast slider. Now I'm going to add a bit of contrast just to the background, and I'm going to let it go on to the bird, but I will mask that out when I bring it into Photoshop. Okay, so looking at the whole picture here, I've got the split screen, and you can see I've just done 10%, and that is quite nice. I'm going to leave it at 10%, going down to the warmth. I just want to add a bit of warmth to it because it was a beautiful morning, and it was the sun had just risen, and it did have that golden look about it. So I'm just going to lift that up a little bit, and you see the further you go up, it gets stronger, and I tend to keep things a little bit lighter. I don't go too warm with it, and I think around 14% will do it. I might even, yeah, I'll leave it at that. And then I also, if you look at this whole image with those two adjustments that I've done, contrast and warmth, that looks quite nice. And I'm just going to add a little bit of black just to, yeah, because it's a dramatic, I want the image to really stand out and to have that mood to it. I'm just gone to 6 there. A little bit dark down there maybe. I can move this over, and I'm just looking in the corners to see what the black looks like, to see if it's too dark. I think that's okay. All right. Okay, so they're the adjustments that I'm making, and now I bring it back into Photoshop, and down the bottom here to right-hand corner, apply as new layer. I click onto that yellow button, and it now will open up in Photoshop. So now it's in Photoshop, and it's come in as a layer, and at the moment the adjustments I made are also on the bird, so I'm going to mask it. So what I do is I do object selection and just mark it around the bird, and you can see that it's a fairly good mask, and I don't really need to feather or anything because it's not a fine adjustment. And go back to the layer and add layer mask. And what you will see at the moment, if we just zoom in a little bit, you will see the adjustment is on the bird itself, not the background. And I did the adjustments to go onto the background. So all I need to do is click on the mask, Control-I, and I'll invert that. And I'll just zoom out, and now you will see that slight adjustments I did is now just on the background. Okay, so now I'm going to open Colour Efex. Just open that. And there it is open in Colour Efex. Colour Efex has filters, and you can see the list down there on the left-hand side. And the ones that I like to use are Detail Extractor, and towards the bottom you've also got the White Neutralizer, which can be quite good when your whites are a little bit off. And you have got lots of other filters there that you might like to have a look through at your own pace. I just want to show you how the Detail Extractor works on this particular image. So I'll click onto that, and once I click onto it, over to the right-hand side, you will see some sliders there and what you can do to it. And all I'm going to do here is, and I'll just go to the slider, you can see the detail on the default setting is way too strong. And I think it is anyway. So I'm going to bring that down to about 14, and you can see it's lightened the bird a little bit. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to, you could try the contrast if you wanted to have a bit of contrast on the bird. And you can drop the opacity if you wish. You can bring the highlights up more or the shadows, but I think just have a little look with it. But no, highlights. No, I'm going to leave that. And again, you can mask in here as well, but I'm going to do that in Photoshop. So I'm going to apply as a new layer and bring it up in Photoshop. And you can see the adjustment's gone onto the background, so it's brought in the layer. So all I'm going to do is object select. I'll select the bird, add my mask, and there you see now it's because it was object, I don't need to invert it or anything. So go to actual 100%, and let's have a look at what we've got. Yeah, okay, so I'm just going to reduce the opacity on that, on my layer a little bit. So you've got two things. You can reduce it in the actual Nik Collection, or you can also, when it comes out in a layer, adjust it there as well. And that's what I've done. So I've just brought it down a little bit. I've got it back in Photoshop. I just want to lift the mid-tones just a little bit. I go to layers, and I'm going to do this by curves. And I'm just going to lift a little bit. You can see the whole image is lifting. Sometimes I will invert and do selective mid-tones, but I'm pretty happy with the overall image there. So that's completed. And you can see that I've got a catch light in the eye. So now I save this as my master crop, and that master crop I use to reduce for different platforms that I want to show this image. Most people add saturation to make a photo pop, but more colour isn't the answer. Push it too far and it starts to look unnatural. Contrast is what actually gives your image depth. It separates your subject. It makes everything feel more real. So instead of adding colour, shape the light, because what your image really needs is contrast.
Here's my song for you. I'll hold you as winter passes through. Sweet dreamer, this is my prayer for you.